Hello and welcome to Recap Radio. I'm Diego Cupolo, editor-in-chief of Turkey Recap, and this is our live show about Turkish politics and foreign policy. Today, I'm talking to Ezgi Başaran, a journalist and author of the book Frontline Turkey, The Conflict at the Heart of the Middle East, and the newsletter Angle, Anchor, and Voice. Hi, Ezgi. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Diego. Thanks for having me.
So, last week, on May 12th, the PKK announced it would disarm and dissolve. This comes about 7 months after the peace process was publicized between the Turkish state and Kurdish militant groups, and the Kurdish militant group. If successful, this could end more than 40 years of conflict that have impacted Turkey, Iraq, and Syria, and beyond. But it's not the first attempt to broker peace. The last peace process in 2013 and 2015 collapsed between 2013 and 2015. Due to domestic and international factors, the last attempt didn't work out. Ezgi specifically documented the last peace process from start to finish and the violent aftermath in her book. And that makes her a great person to talk about what we're seeing today and how to place it in the wider timeline of regional politics and violence. So before we start, let me do my usual disclosure for Kurdish politics. My wife is an MP with the pro-Kurdish Dem Party here in Turkey. And finally, this is a live cast. It's uncut, unedited. We're going to try to run 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how many questions we get and how it goes. And yeah, listeners are welcome to send their questions in the Substack app. We're going to try to get to all of them. But to start, Ezgi, let me ask you, what are you looking out for in this current peace process? We're all waiting for more news, but what are you looking out for?
So thanks for this great introduction and all your work at Turkey Recap. I think it's a very important outlet that you've created, Diego. And it's very informative and it's real. And it really looks like that you're reporting from within Turkey. What we're looking for is we're at the very early stages, and as I've said many times, it's just the beginning. The logical in terms of conflict resolution, the logical step is the disarmament, demobilization, and then reintegration. However, this process is a bit different than many other conflict resolution processes, and especially from 2013 and 2015. The first difference is that this is very transactional. I mean, and the main instigator is the Turkish state's security and intelligence apparatus, which in another way of saying that politics is in the second, backseat. So the Turkish state is acting with some kind of urgency, I think, and that hence the involvement of the very ultra-nationalist leader Devlet Bahçeli. He is persuaded in some way, I think, by the foreign minister and the MIT chief, the spy chief Ibrahim Kalın, that I think it's time for the existing order, the status quo in the Middle East is unraveling, and it's a time of threat and opportunity for Turkey. With this in mind, I think they are on the same page with the PKK's imprisoned leader Abdullah Öcalan, because he thinks that this is a moment for PKK and the Kurdish movement to redefine itself. So the ways of looking at the Middle East by the Turkish state and the Kurdish movement, led by Abdullah Öcalan ideology, which is a Marxist movement, is converged, and so they decided to do stuff, and so this is different than 2013. 2013, the main instigator was the government. I mean, it can be opaque when I say the government and the state, but we're in this process. We're talking about a state apparatus, the state mindset, the state bureaucracy, or the intelligence service, rather than um, you know, preparing a political groundwork for the peace process. Because in the end, Kurdish issue is a political issue, and it has to be resolved by political means, which is a new constitution, a recognition of Kurdish rights and culture, and these are not even talked about at the moment. And my sources within the Kurdish movement, um, the, I just realized that this is not their priority at the moment either, even though the main priority is to have the disarmament process with some kind of a formal recognition, a formal guarantee, something written on paper of the, I mean, coming from the Turkish state, so that they feel protected in terms of, you know, um, if they, lay down arms and then they are promised to be, certain live in certain places. They want this to happen, not like um I'm saying I promise that what I'm going to do it is not enough. So the main problem is the timeline, and this is something we should look out for, because um this Turkish state says that announcing disbandment and dissolution is not the same as disbandment and dissolution, disarming. First, we need to see have the arms delivered to us. So the idea is they're going to cooperate with KDP in Iraq, an Iraqi state. And I mean, the cooperation will be, it's a three-legged cooperation, that one side will be the Turkish intelligence and Iraqi and state, and the KDP officials will be involved, and the all clearance will be given to the Turkish state by the intelligence officials when the PKK members hand their guns to the Iraqi officials. This is the part about Iraq. They're also negotiating with Iran about PKK's disarming, and with Al Shara about the integration of SDF to the Syrian army. So the timeline doesn't fit because the PKK leadership wants something on paper, which the Turkish justice minister, I think 2 days ago, had this really ambiguous, long answer to one of the journalist questions about, I mean, what will be the legal amendments or arrangements are being done with regards to the disarmament process. He just talked about all kinds of stuff, but the issue of disarmament. So this signals that he hasn't received the full picture from Beştepe, or Devlet Bahçeli side, because Devlet Bahçeli's statement is also very interesting. He says that, let me have a look, because it's interesting, because he says that the extent with the so the key questions, he says, must be addressed: the timeline and conditions and the extent, the scope of disarmament. So I think it's talking it means the extent of disarmament of the Syrian wing, and who will monitor and oversee the compliance and the technical mechanisms, and you know how. And I think it's a valid question that the potential realignments of the PKK leadership or the middle ranks that may just potentially join to PYD. So this is a very complex, multi actor, multi, country process. And the Turkish state argues that it can be done within 4 or 5 months. Around September, October, they want it to be completed, and I think it's because they are so uneasy that a provocation from either side, it could be from other regional actors or from within the Turkish state or from within the PKK, that something might happen and the process would collapse. So that hence the urgency.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a super huge topic with many dimensions that I appreciate you're trying to outline them, but it's so complicated and so wide spanning that I think, it could go any direction, and it's good to try to piece together what we've seen in the past and what might be coming. Because, like you say, even the justice minister is giving very vague responses, rambling responses to random
Exactly.
questions.
Rambling is the right word.
Yeah. So, I mean, the latest thing that happened over the weekend was, right, this statement from Baceli where he's proposing a commission in parliament to oversee all of this and maybe provide some structure, right?
So the thing is, I think one of the things we also need to watch for is the main opposition CHP's, position. I think both the CHP leader Özgür Özel and CHP's presidential candidate who's in prison, Ekrem İmamoğlu, couple of times, said, reassured, gave their reassurance and support to the process, but also underscored that the parliament has to be involved. With the initiation of the presidential system, the parliament doesn't have much, say about. It doesn't have practical sway over much of the, its role is significantly curtailed since the introduction of the presidential system. But conducting the process under its auspices offers both, I think, transparency and a sense of guarantee for all parties involved. And this is exactly what the Kurdish movement wants. And it would make it so much easier if Ekrem İmamoğlu and Özgür Özel continue to support this stance, this position. But we have to also, CHP leader, I just realized that Özgür Özel oscillates, between rational positioning and, and appeasing a small but influential segment of his, what we say, ulusalcı, segment, nationalist, hawkish voter base. So, but we should give the guy a break. He's just running in between prison and just trying to gather rallies and maintain the mobilization, and then we expect him to have a strong supportive stance towards the peace process, but their position is essential for the safety and welfare of the process, I believe. And I think this has been said. The involvement of the parliament, it's so ironic that it's the PKK, which is considered a terrorist organization, that keeps asking for the parliament to be involved, whereas the Turkish state tries to find solutions, you know, with, you know what I mean? I mean, just not to have anything on paper. Although I have some you know, sources tell me that um, intelligence officers are very keen on having something written on paper to protect themselves in the
Yeah,
future, for
yeah.
fear of reprisal, or you know.
On that point, there's been a lot of complaints about the lack of transparency in this process, the lack of timeline and just public information. And I listened to a podcast yesterday called Geospaces, highly recommend it, on the New
Uh-huh.
Region website. It had Giran Özcan on it from the Kurdish Peace Institute.
Yeah.
And Giran was formerly with the HDP, which is now Dem Party. And he says, basically, maybe that lack of transparency is a good thing because he thought the last peace process had too much transparency. And when people knew what was going on, which issues were being discussed, they became part of the public discourse. They were on television, in the media. And this, he
Yes.
said, might have not helped the negotiations behind the scenes. What do you make of that?
So when we look back at the lessons that we can gather from the 2013-15 process, for example, it started with, you know, polls saying that almost 79% of Turkish public supported the process. So yes, there were videos and footage and, you know, photographs of uh, you know um, uh, you know, PKK militants coming, busloads, coming to Turkey from Camp Mahmur, going in from the Harbor Gate, and that caused a bit and, you know, uneasiness, and but it didn't last long. So, what really, I mean, it's, I think with the DDR process, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, I think the first two Ds are very technical processes that can be dealt by experts. And I don't think we should know all kinds of details. But that is true. That, I mean, it can be done, uh, but you know, being untransparent. I mean, being discreet doesn't mean being opaque. You know, there's a difference to solving problems in a fait accompli de jour kind of way than you know, doing in a discreet manner. Do you see what I mean? So I understand that some of the, yeah, no one needs to, you know, see pictures or militant. I mean, there no need for any kind of display in that manner. I understand that, but it wasn't the main reason that the first 2013-15 um, you know, process collapse. It's not because Turkish public was so angry, there was rage. No, it wasn't like that. I mean, first, you know, I mean, the first person who got really, really upset was Tayyip Erdogan himself, when now imprisoned leader Selahattin Demirtas, you know, told in his, you know, party group speech, you know, invented this you know, slogan that we will not make you president. And you know, Tayyip Erdogan is a political animal, and he lives by the polls, and the polls that, you know, led to 2015 June election show that this whole process, where, when, I mean, which he began with, this is the moment of my career, and you know, I will drink poison hemlock, but will pursue and continue this. And in 2 years' time, it was obvious for him. It was a reckoning that it didn't really, you know, provide him much votes or popularity. He was just standing still in that sense. Who gained more prominence is, uh, unsurprisingly, the Kurdish movement, which made him really, really angry. That was the first, actually, elections that Erdogan government lost.
Mhm.
And this, he was so angry, he disregarded all kinds of negotiations, and he made a runoff of the, he impeded any coalition talks, and we had a rerun of the elections in November 2015. So we need to just realize what happened. This was one part. The second was Öcalan, obviously, and said we then later realized that from the notes of their meetings that Öcalan said that Rojava is our red line, which means that, um, as I've argued, with the Syrian civil war, the PKK's priority was shifted. It shifted so drastically that it was Syrian politics. I mean, how to um, see that rise to the opportunity. I mean, or fill in that opportunity structure with the ideology that Abdullah Öcalan, manifested over the years. So Rojava was the ultimate red line, and it was a red line for the Turkish state too, which culminated into almost five military incursions to Syria, a lot of bloodshed, investments in military posts in Iraq and Syria, and many Syrian refugees. But it's I mean, Syrian refugees is not one of the main components of the Kurdish. So what I'm trying to tell you is it's a mix of it's never it's I think we are underestimating the maturity and exhaustion of the Turkish public when it comes to this uh, problem. Kurdish and Turkish public, the public of Turkey, wants to solve this no matter what, you
Mhm.
know, and it's usually the leadership on either side that, or, provocations from other states and, entities that leads to a either a deadlock or a collapse. So I agree that it doesn't have to be so open to public, because there's a really technicality to this process, and there are experts and a plethora of literature and scholarship on this conflict resolution that tells us that, yeah, being discreet is important, but it doesn't mean um, not involving the parliament. At some point, this has to be a shared project. The problem is, Turkey is going through its most authoritarian stage. And, now Erdogan is at one side talking about a terror free Turkey, and negotiating with, I mean, the state is negotiating with the PKK on the disarmament, while just claiming, just I think Erdogan is also on the verge of inventing another terror or kind of a parallel, or crime organization around CHP's, the main opposition's presidential candidate Ekrem İmamoğlu. So it will the terrorism label, which gives a free reign over authoritarian governments, um, can still remain even though PKK disbands or dissolves. So we have to realize that this is also about Kurdish movement's maturity and its own decision. Because as one of my sources tell me, when Öcalan was involved, it sent um, four letters, one to the European diaspora, to Brussels, and one to DEM party, one to Mazlum Abdi, and one to Kandil, PKK's leadership. So the letter, I mean, a combination of. So what he had said is that to Muslim Abdi is that there is, I mean, it would be illogical to ask for a separate army. What you need to do is to be a prime actor in the Syrian politics. So we see again, and also it's very interesting that also HTS is going through this localization of their ideology, and Öcalan is telling the Syrian wing to be a political actor that determines the fate of Syria. So be in a pan-Syrian, rhetoric and integrate into the army. And but it's also interesting because you know uh, the Syrian case is um, you know. This Syrian case will determine the fate of this process as well. But you know, Öcalan is saying that the time of the armed struggle ends, and he, in that letter, talks about two examples: Hezbollah and Hamas. See what's happening to them. That's why he says uh, all armed organization that voluntarily ends its struggle. It's time for PKK to voluntarily end its struggle. Otherwise, look what happened to Hezbollah and Hamas. So
Mhm.
this is a by and large a moment in Kurdish political movement to decide on its own, and they decided to negotiate with the Turkish state in this turmoil of the Middle East.
Mhm. We're getting a few questions, and and you mentioned the Turkish public and broader societal perceptions of the peace process. So some people are asking, doesn't the country deserve to be part of the public discourse about this when we're talking about transparency of the process? And also, um, another commenter says that this peace process is to keep Erdogan in power, which I think, to add some context, we should say that the reason this is starting, broadly defined, is that Erdogan is seeking a third term as president, and he wants support from Dem Party to change the constitutional amendments to allow that. That's the broad narrative behind a lot
Yeah,
of
but
this peace process discussion. And I just want to say the public reaction has been, you wrote in your piece on your Substack, basically that the public reaction has been with deep caution and suspicion, right?
mhm, mhm.
So do you think that Turkish citizens are ready for this moment?
That's I mean, I'm trying to make the case that they've been ready for the last decade. It's just, I mean, we there's a few clique that makes a lot of noise, but do not represent the main sentiment. I think of broader Turkish public. The Yes, there's suspicion because, like I said, Erdogan is not. I mean, we're run in a one party oligarchic system with a huge cronyist system, cronyist machinery. And so it's hard to expect transparency and uh, democratic reform, which this whole Kurdish issue is premised upon, for a solution is premised upon. So it, of course, how is he going to resolve this conflict if he imprison Ekrem İmamoğlu with bogus charges, with hearsay, and there's no press freedom. There's no one to, check and balance his power, and so the suspicion and caution is very normal. What I'm trying to tell is that it doesn't mean that this is solely about um, the Kurdish movement's impetus, or its uh, its understanding of how the process is being led. That is their road, and there's a convergence. The Turkish public, this is why, of course, they deserve to know. We all need to know, but we need to know we don't need to know the technical, details of who is taking the guns and where, and those details. I mean, in no country would or organization would be allowed to do that. What Turkish public wants to know is, what are the terms of this negotiation? So hence the question of, will it lead um, to Erdogan becoming a president for life? So this argument is one of the main arguments of the opposition, and people who vote for the opposition. The thing that I'm not convinced is that, how is that going to work? So the next elections is in 2028. There can be a snap election, but the snap election cannot happen without the endorsement of the CHP. And CHP said that they will not be okay with a snap election, just a year prior to. If AKP wants to go to have a early election, let's do it now. In 6 months, they're going to do it. So how would DEM party or the Kurdish people enable Erdogan in that sense is not clear to me. I think this is a very memorized line that really lacks foundation, because elections, even though very unfair on a very it's not a level playing field, obviously, for decades now, but it's very unpredictable. How can you make all of DEM party electorate to vote for Erdogan? I mean, Erdogan knows it doesn't work like that. That's why he's not really embracing it politically. He's now just turning it into a terror-free. Just look at how he embraced and initiated the 2013 process, and how for months he opted to be on the back seat. I mean, just behind the, obviously, there's nothing in Turkey that can happen without his consent. But giving his consent is one thing, and embracing and utilizing the process is another thing. I don't think Erdogan relies heavily on neither DEM parties, so-called hypothetical support in a constitutional reform at the parliament, or having Kurdish votes just pouring into AKP. The practicalities of this is unclear to me, to be honest, and I don't think it's the main locomotive of this process.
Yeah, we got another question asking about best and worst case scenarios where this could go for domestic politics and regional dynamics. What conditions?
I really don't want to jinx it, to be honest. But the best case scenario is that so the bodies, not the committees, but it's kind of the mechanisms that the intelligence agency is building with Iraqi state, KDP, and Talibani factions will work seamlessly, and the PKK hands over their arms. Um, the ones that the militants that did not, has not committed a crime will go back to their home, and there has to be a program already in place that would reintegrate them into the social life and system. And the PKK leadership, around 40 to 50 top leadership, will be given choices of, places to live, which would be either in somewhere in Europe or in Süleymaniye, where a Talibani faction, who's also, um, leftist, Iraqi Kurdistan party, they can stay in Süleymaniye, which many people think they would. And this again will be, and then there will be a constitutional reform and amendment for the Kurdish rights, and um, obviously, I'm sorry, the start will have to be about the conditions of Abdullah Öcalan in İmralı prison. So, for the safety of the process, the PKK makes the argument that Öcalan has to, has to be actively involved in every step of the way, which requires him to have a and how they word it is that his physical arrangements should be freer. So uh, he, apparently he doesn't want some kind of a house arrest or full, because it would have been, he needs to be protected. And so the word is that there is going to be an environment on Imralı Island where the Turkish state protects him and obviously monitors him. But so this is the best case scenario for the for the next few months, or more than few months. It takes years sometimes for such organizations to disarm, but more demobilize. So in between disarmament and demobilization, the reform, legal reforms has to be done. The problem is, who's going to do it? Who? It's just when we think of Tayyip Erdogan just implementing some kind of cultural rights or democratic rights, um, it just looks like a joke to many people, understandably so. Um, the worst case scenario is that it could be either from within the state, or from a third party. It could be Israeli intelligence agency, Iranian intelligence agency, Saudi Arabian intelligence agency, to do something that would derail this, or someone from within the PKK offshoots that would sabotage the process, and it's collapsed. It collapses. This is a nightmare, because it's a rare moment when you do not have someone like Devlet Bahçeli being a opponent of this. This is once in a lifetime opportunity for the Turkish state. That's why it has to work out, even though in this authoritarian setting, because the first disarmament and the demobilization, that time frame can be done even in authoritarian settings with undemocratic leaders, if there's a will, and I think there's a will on both sides. But you can never be sure about external actors. We can't be sure.
Yeah, yeah. And the last one didn't work. mainly because of developments in Syria,
Yes.
which remains highly unstable right now. There's many ways that
Yes.
this could go down a wrong path
Either
because
way.
of
Yes.
external developments, and we don't even know what Trump will do if we want to throw in U.S.
So
question mark.
true. So
So
true.
we continue to have questions from Carmelo. Thank you, Carmelo. One of them is pretty broad. What is the Kurdish issue? Like, he's asking what political rights do Kurds in Turkey not have at the moment? And I'm guessing he's asking about a general question to understand what this is about, because I can point to having democratically elected representatives govern would be one of the requests of this peace
Exactly.
process. What else? Because I mean, he's asking about self-determination and succession, but Öcalan
No. I
doesn't want
mean,
that.
since 1990s, uh, it's not a contrary to many people's belief, it's not a cessationist movement since 1990s. I mean, Öcalan came up with this idea of democratic confederalism. Even now, he backed down from that, and he would like to, and he acknowledges that many of the foundation of his ideology uh, was emerged and then matured during the Cold War era and the Cold War mentality. So he has revised, and what he wants is decentralization. I mean, it's a very municipal movement. They want to be governed by by people that live in that area, and you know who are elected. And so they want in the Kurdish region, semi-autonomous, just more decentralized. Actually, it can be done with the current system, that stronger municipalities and Kurdish language to be recognized in the constitution is actually it's very doable. I mean, we're talking about Devlet Bahçeli inviting Abdullah Öcalan and sending him his regards. This is, I mean, for people who don't follow Turkish nationalists, it's such a huge leap that you just have to pinch yourself at some point that if it's real or it's just a farcical dream after a long night that you're seeing. So I think uh, compared to the rhetoric coming out of Devlet Bahçeli, the real things that the Kurdish movement want are comparably modest. They just want their cultural rights to be recognized, and not have their mayor to be imprisoned and their mayorship to be confiscated. They don't want a huge police presence in their cities, and there's no demand about a autonomy, semi-autonomy, in the sense that or federation or confederation. They just want their democratic and civil and cultural rights, which can be done with constitutional amendments, and just let them live. To be
I mean,
honest.
you've supported the peace process and equality generally for a long time as a
Yeah.
journalist in Turkey, and you've been following this for many decades, right?
Yeah.
So my big broad question is basically, I came to Turkey in 2015 to live here permanently, and since then it's been many terrorism related issues have happened here, right? Including the war in the southeast. So when we're talking about this terror-free Turkey, as the government calls it, it's a very nice slogan because you can't oppose a terror-free Turkey. But at the same time, I find that terrorism or the fight against it is kind of the foundation of everything I've experienced in this country, right? It's the reason why we have cross-border operations in Iraq and Syria. It's the reason why people go to jail for social media posts. It's always terrorism, right? And the
Yeah.
broad definition of terrorism is one of the reasons why Turkey did not get the visa liberalization with EU states under that 2016 refugee deal. Basically, they needed to redefine their terror code. So my question for you is, what does a terror-free Turkey look like in principle, and what do you think the difference is between the principle and what the government's trying to establish now with the process? Basically, like, what should a terror-free Turkey be, and what is the government working towards?
So, like I said, this you just have to realize, if you look at discourse analysis, you would never see the word Kurdish issue, Kurdish question, which was present, and the public was, informed by interviews, like programs, documentaries in 2013. We were genuinely trying to make sense of what this issue is. This is a transactional process, hence, there's no Kurd in the slogan. So it's a terror free, you know, Turkey, which starts with PKK's disarmament, and it may lead, as Erdogan's latest speech, hints, that it may lead to, for example, another group being targeted as now terrorists, which could be the CHP. So I don't think terror-free Turkey will be present because it's so useful. I mean, it could be used as a, election campaign in 2 or 3 years, so he could list that I've finished Fethullah Gulen movement, I've also finished PKK, and I've also get rid of the Ekrem İmamoğlu organization. It's just when you are when you consolidated uh, your power within state apparatuses, you can basically have free reign. And Erdogan now, the Kurdish movement wants more autonomy within their municipalities, but Erdogan, because he lost many of the municipalities to the CHP in the last election, may try to curb all their you know power to basically just collecting waste, or just planting, landscaping, planting, flowers around the city. So we have to realize, and I think manage our expectations about this government. What, in my opinion, I'm keeping my sanity by focusing on the Kurdish movement, and periodize their uh, their maturity, or their prospects, rather than expecting democracy, or quote unquote terror free Turkey from uh, this government. So this is my key, and I advise everyone to look at this issue like that. This is a very transactional process, so we, concerned citizens of the world, has to be transactional sometimes.
Mm, mm. Yeah. And we've been talking 15 minutes.
This is just the first step. I mean, this is not about recognizing that Kurdish issue, or any issue, requires democratic reform and strong democratic institutions, checks and balances, press freedom. It's a whole package. But having a PKK out of the picture will enhance, and the Kurdish movement and the civil politicians of the Kurdish movement, which is very, very important, which is a very good thing. They are very sophisticated democratic force within Turkey. So I see this as as a within the parameters of Kurdish movement.
Mhm. Yeah, and just to start wrapping up, I didn't want to keep you more than an hour. We're approaching that. What comes next? Can you look forward and kind of point out areas for potential concessions or potential hazards?
Like I said, I mean, anything can happen. It's a very fragile and complex, process. Syria is anything can come out from Syria. It's important to watch out for Israel, Ahmed al-Shara, and Tayyip Erdogan, to be honest.
Mhm.
And just, you know, feel that it's going to pray. That's actually the most rational thing to do when it comes to Turkish politics of Turkey and the Middle East at the moment.
Mhm, mhm. And one more question from the audience, one more, about one of your recent pieces about Rumeysa Öztürk, the
Mhm,
Turkish student that
mhm,
was detained in the US. You wrote that Erdogan's selective rage, you wrote about
mhm.
Erdogan's selective rage and how he was less vocal about her imprisonment and mistreatment. And
He was not less vocal. He wasn't vocal at all. I mean,
yeah, so,
this was the moment for. I mean, this was an opportunity for him to, just make this case a matter of human rights, which it was, and it was about the Palestinian issue, the genocide. He could have just, used his clout that that he boasts. He said nothing because at that time, Hakan Fidan was talking to Marco Rubio, and they were in negotiations about Syria. So he just chose not to. This is a selective outrage. I mean, when when when required, he can be so mad and have a 1 minute um, scene in Davos, or just calls Abdel Fattah el-Sisi a murderer, Mohammed bin Salman, another murderer. But then he keeps silent, he negotiates. So the main drivers for his actions are not principles or ideology or Islamism. I've written a book about this. My recent book is about Islamists being extremely pragmatic. So but it's not only Islamists being pragmatic. I mean, we can see how Orban or Trump is also transactional and pragmatic and selectively outraged.
mhm, mhm. Well, thank you, Ezgi. Once again, for people that joined late, we've been talking to Ezgi
Thank you,
Başaran,
everyone.
journalist and author. Her book is Frontline Turkey, if you want to pick it up. She's also the writer of Angle, Anchor, and Voice on Substack. This podcast, this webcast will be a podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcast. Thank you for the people that tuned in and sent questions. And thank you, Ezgi, for joining.
Thank you, Diego, for doing a wonderful job at your Turkey recap.
Likewise to you. Looking forward to your next post.
Thank you.
Till
Have a
next
good
time.
day. Bye.